This video is sponsored by Yellow Mountain Imports, the premier Go supply center for North America. For a limited time, you can get a 10% discount on any Go-related product with the discount code Sente10. The link is in the description below. Happy playing! Hello everyone. Welcome. And I hope you're ready because this chapter is one of my favorite chapters. Welcome to Lessons in the Fundamental of Go, a video review of every single chapter where I break down all of the lessons that Kageyama talked about in his book and try to recast them as palatable and accessible lessons for Q players and Don players of all levels. So I hope you're excited because this chapter is the culmination of the last few chapters that we have been working on. So if you haven't seen those videos, I recommend checking out my Lessons in the Fundamental of Go series. We'll link that in the description below. However, if you are all caught up, prepare yourself because we're gonna have a lot of fun. So, got a new green screen, got my positive can-do attitude, and we have the book. So let's get going, shall we? Now, in the last chapter, we focused on the stones go walking, which is an analysis in when you should play away, when you should tanuki, when the sequence that you've created is finished, and if your opponent plays away before that time, how you can take advantage of it. Now, we're going to take that one step further and let you in on the principle that should be your guiding light in the majority of your Go interactions and positional interactions, which is the struggle to get ahead. So let's take an example. So let's take these two stones and let's, for a complete trivialized example, pretend that they're going to be walking a line across the stone and they want to get as much of an advantage as they can. Black can go up and then white moves forward, then black moves forward, then white moves forward, then black moves forward, then white moves forward, all the way across the board. As you can see, if both stones were to walk in this fashion, they would be basically dividing the board completely in half. This is what you want to try to avoid in your games. This is not getting ahead of your opponent. This is keeping things exactly as they were and not pushing your advantage any further. However, when we play Go, we are trying to search for any and every small positional advantage that we can that can give us an edge in the game. So if we take it back, how could black get ahead of white? Even though black has the first move, he's kind of wasting it by just going across in the line. This creates the same situation as white moving first. If white has the first move and then it's like this, the exact same result happens, which means that black didn't get as much value out of having the first move advantage as he should have. So what can black do instead? When we say the struggle to get ahead, what we are really talking about is bending around your opponent's edge. This is why Go is called the surrounding game. By bending around your opponent's edge, you are now forcing them into a smaller and smaller area of the board. Now we can see that even though they both started out in the exact same spot, white is going to be getting less than black is going to be getting, because black was able to get ahead of his opponent. This principle of always trying to bend around your opponent's leading edge is the driving force behind most strategies in Go. If the situation allows, double hanes are very, very, very powerful, because this allows you to bend around your opponent's edge twice as fast. Can you imagine if black got this double hane and now the flow was like this? This is even better for black. Now we can see black's walls commanding a much larger area than white's is. And so the moral of this story is the more you can get ahead and the faster that you can surround your opponent, even if that group lives, it doesn't have to die. Even if that group lives, your game and your position is going to be so much stronger because of it. But of course, Go would not be Go if it was that easy. Right? Go would not be Go if it was that easy. What happens if white cuts? Because remember, trying to get ahead of your opponent is a trade-off. You are making a trade-off with every single move that you make. By bending around your opponent's edge faster, you are opening yourself up to getting cut. And so it's important to develop the reading skill and intuition to read out your cuts. Make sure that if your opponent cuts you, it's okay, you can handle it. Because if a cut is dubious, then it will just create a weak group and there won't be any issues. So does this Hane work for white? Can black get ahead of their opponent? Pause the video, run through some variations, and let me know your findings. Can white cut here? Remember, these types of questions are very important if you want to get ahead of your opponent and utilize that advantage to the fullest. So in this case, you cannot. Black extends down, white extends down, and black continues to extend down. The simple ways don't work. And the best white can hope for is this Atari, but after black captures, black is in great shape. So it's very important to know when you can or can't cut. And that goes for if your opponent's trying to get ahead of you. If they make a dubious surround, it's very important to try to cut and fight back. Because if you just passively let your opponent get away with murder and not fight back, you're going to find yourself in a very, very, very difficult position moving forwards. You can see this sort of variation in real life, where if white has to move here and black invades, we see both players trying to get ahead of their opponents at every single turn. Because black started off the invasion, black ends up behind, but this was a planned invasion. And even in the newer variations, here, white always wants to make this exchange to get ahead of the opponent. In this case, even though white is playing away in the new variations, because Sente is very valuable according to AI, they made sure that at worst, black and white were even here. And the decision to get ahead in this position is dependent on the value of the rest of the board. But notice, white didn't play here and then allow black to do this. This Hane is so important from a fundamental perspective on keeping your opponent from getting ahead of you. Now, there is a Joseki sequence where black does a knight's move against white stone and white extends once, black extends once, and then white one space jumps. You're probably wondering why in particular white decided to one space jump here, what the significance of that is, and what this walk actually means. Well, you can sort of think of any Joseki as a struggle to get ahead, or at least get as ahead as your opponent. If white were to just continue to press along this way, white would not be getting ahead. Black would be one step ahead of white at every single move. But by doing this one space jump, we now see that white is ahead of black for every move, which means that now that white is ahead of black, white will get to start the bend and can initiate bending around their leading edge before black can. And this subtle move, this one space jump, is so critical for getting ahead. That is why it's a Joseki. If you start looking at Josekis less as random sequences and more as how can you maneuver your stones such that you have the most options to get ahead and surround your opponent, you're in a pretty good spot. But remember, every time we try to get ahead, there's a trade-off. There's a weakness we're leaving behind, and for white's case, that weakness is A. If black pushes through, can white handle this? Is this a safe way for white to get ahead? Pause the video, try to run through some sequences, and let me know your thoughts. Well, in this case, as you probably guessed, since it's a Joseki, it is safe. White blocks, black cuts, white defends, black can try to extend, but once white extends, white is ahead of black, can bend around black's leading edge. White is ahead in the capturing race. And white is able to capture the 3 stones. So there is no reason for white to worry about the cut here. Therefore, white can play this one space jump. If you can handle the cuts, you can get ahead of your opponent. If you can't handle the cuts, you're going to need to play more solidly. And that's the line that pros and high-level players have to walk with every single one of their moves, because one missed point or one missed efficiency move can spell disaster. Let's imagine that white continued to push for one more time, and then do this. This is actually significantly worse. If black makes this move, black gets a lot more influence and power than if the sequence was here. It might not seem like a lot, but that one extra point compounds in terms of its effectiveness from a whole board perspective, which is why you should take the earliest opportunity to get ahead that you can, provided that your cuts work out. So if we're trying to take the earliest possible opportunity, what if white just does this? Forget extending one more time. What if white just jumps? Well, besides the fact that that's against the way that the stone should walk in our previous chapter, we actually read and find out that that doesn't work. If white blocks, black can cut. If white chooses this variation, black gets a really great ladder and outer presence in the outside of the board. If white chooses to protect, black gets a huge corner and is able to completely cut through white. This is not a good result for white, especially since this was white's corner to begin with. That is why white has to respond to the shoulder hit once, and then can respond with trying to get ahead of their opponent. The proper way for white to get ahead in this situation is to play here, one space jump, extend one more time so white can handle the cuts, and then do a beautiful double hane. Now white is developing much stronger. White is creating more power on the left side of the board, and black's position is being crunched. I want you to get used to falling in love with this flow for white. I want you to get used to feeling bad if you were playing black and your position got crunched in like this. And I'm sure instinctively a lot of you feel bad when your opponents surround you, but you don't quite understand why you feel bad. And the reason is because getting that surround and keeping your opponent locked in a part of the board increases your attacking options. It decreases the options for your opponent to expand. It is so much more valuable in the later game than amateurs give it credit for. And that's why it's really hard to handle sometimes. Have you ever watched a pro game or looked over a pro game and it feels like both sides are so madly obsessed about a certain fight that breaks out that neither leaves it alone? And it seems like this fight sprawls across the entire board and you don't understand why? Why they aren't just playing passively and taking big points as people claim to say is important in the fundamentals? If you look at Go in the pro level less as trying to surround points and less as trying to get ahead of your opponent for the late game, all of these moves start to make way more sense. The one space jumps, the attacks, refusing to leave the position alone until the fight is settled, are so important. They are always trying to figure out what the earliest opportunity is to gain even the tiniest positional advantage of their opponent. Us mortals have a little bit of a harder time with that, but we can still use the principles of getting ahead in our own games in our own way. Now, I want to put a little bit of a trigger warning. This next part of the video, Kageyama kind of rips into a lot of our Go styles here. So let's pretend it's white's move. And we see this area by black, and then white plays here. I'm gonna just read straight from the book so y'all don't get mad at me. I promise these are not my words. Those who feel no doubts about this strategy probably belong to the school that holds that the best way to play, when you see an enemy sphere of influence, is to break right into the middle of it. This is the creed of the jealousy sect. Rush right in whenever your opponent makes an open extension. No one can expect to make progress with that approach. White 1 is the kind of move that sows the seeds of one's own distress on enemy ground. The same person who approves of 1 will, when he has black and white hat plays 1, feel as if a time bomb has been dropped inside their territory. Then they will rush into a frenzied attack on it, steam spouting from their ears and nostrils, and there will go the game. So Kageyama's not a fan of the just jumping in whenever your opponent can kind of make territory. We can probably see that since no groups are in danger, this is actually a very big move for white. It's starting to separate the sector between black's extension and white's extension. It's a very key move. And even if I wanted to attack something, these two stones here might be better targets than just plopping a stone in the middle. But what is the fundamental reason why this is the case? Well, the reason is because when you place a stone so far in your enemy's territory without a clear plan, your opponent will be able to get ahead of you. And the more ahead of you they can get, the more they'll be able to surround your group, cap it, create that situation that we've discussed is very, very hard for white to deal with. And then get more strength on the outside of the game to get more points than white took away. Given what I've just told you, how can white break into black's moyo without creating a weak group that black would be able to get ahead of and get a positional advantage? Come with some spots, pause the video. All right, got some ideas? All right, well, any high-level players will sort of immediately see this white attachment at 1 as a potential target. This feels like an absurd move for beginners. They don't get why you would do that. However, it's a sacrifice play. The key in keeping your opponents from getting ahead of you is to make sure that you create the correct sabaki, or life-making. If you play here, and let's say black very aggressively hanes, white will get to crosscut. This means that black has forced to surround this stone to save the corner. White gets to play here. White gets to play here. And then white gets to jump out even further with this move, deliberately creating cutting points that black will have to take advantage of. But once black does, white will be able to leave safely, create a group that is not as able to be attacked, and now look what has happened. We've taken black's moyo. Black threw a bunch of stones in their own territory that they already had in the first place. And now white has actually separated this black stone A throughout the sabaki, and now black stone is going to need to try to find life somewhere. So thanks to this sabaki, not only was white able to create a light shape, but they're able to effectively reduce black's area, keep from being attacked, and keep from being surrounded, so black cannot get ahead of white anymore. And when you're thinking about invading moyos, always think about how your opponent can get ahead of you, and have a plan for that. Don't just plop a stone right in the middle and expect everything to work out okay, because a lot of the times you're going to find that your opponent is going to be able to get ahead of you, bend around the edge, and you're not going to have as good as a position as you thought you did. In fact, a great example of Josekis that are essentially a struggle to get ahead are these kinds. Black enacts a high pincer. White needs to try to get ahead of their opponent here. White is going to attempt to get ahead, bend around their opponent's quarter. Black is going to respond in kind, keeping white from getting ahead, right? Trying to win the race and keep their stones from being surrounded. White then tries to dive into the corner to get a base, and also to try to get ahead of their opponent in the corner. Black blocks, and white tries to get ahead out from underneath this black pincer stone. Now this black pincer stone is adrift. It doesn't have a base or eye shape, and white is trying to squeak away and avoid being surrounded completely. This is a Joseki, and when you look at it in the context of getting ahead, a lot of the moves make a lot more sense. Perhaps a more dramatic example could be shown here. Black presses down, white meets them, black extends, white tries to get ahead in the other direction, black does not let them. Protect cut point, the struggle to get ahead again, black extends. White can't afford to create cut points right now, so white has to extend one more time. Threatens the cut point, and a one-space jump to try to get ahead of black. This is another natural Joseki. It's a natural walk, and we can see both sides trying with every move to keep their opponent contained. Knowing when the situation is worth leaving and when the situation stays is a matter of the stones go walking, and that we've sort of covered in the last chapter. But it really has to do with whole board thinking and what is worth more at the time. Next, I want to talk about the power of the knight's move in getting ahead of your opponent. Let's take this 3-3 stone. The typical Joseki is black shoulder hits, white extends, black extends. White plays here, and then white plays here. Why is it that white plays the knight's move instead of simply extending? Well, it's easier to get ahead if you can jump out further. And this low stone at the knight's move is white's way of getting ahead and refusing to be surrounded by black. If black does try to get ahead of white, we actually see that there is potential for white to cut here. This could be very valuable later and could turn the tables on black. Black plays here, white gets to extend and is now one step ahead of black, and although white is crawling on the second line, from a fundamental of Go perspective, trying to shoot out as far as you can while still maintaining the integrity of your group is something you should always strive for with every move that you make. It's the same reason why when white shoulder hits and black extends, white extends, black plays this knight's move. You see this knight's move for undercuts, and that's very common in sort of middle game fighting. The reason is that it's shooting out further than white can effectively cover. And this ensures that black can get ahead of white in this situation. If we see white trying to get ahead, we see a brutal cut here, and white's position is completely destroyed. So white can't do what black did in this situation, and so white has to bend around this way and try to get ahead in another dimension of the game. If black just played passively here, white gets a pretty decently sized wall that will really be able to help white in the rest of the game. Sure, black got about 10 points with this exchange, but black's potential is completely destroyed. And if white didn't take the opportunity to reduce when they did, black would extend up here. And now it's much, much scarier and much harder for white to make an effective advantage when reducing this black framework. So the timing for picking your reductions and getting ahead of your opponent in the reductions is a very important aspect of trying to get ahead in the game as a whole. Let's say instead of the shoulder hit, white just decided to play here. And black jumps up, white jumps up, black jumps up, white jumps up. You've seen this before, right? I'm sure y'all have seen the infinite jumps where everyone just yeets themselves into the center of the board. No regard for anything. It's often said that according to Kageyama, the one space jump is never wrong. And that's true. You should always be looking for the earliest opportunity to bend around the edge of your opponent. If black were to continue like this, it's kind of the same as if white got the first move in that situation. Having the first move advantage means you get to dictate the flow of the game, and it's very important to try to use that as effectively as you can. Let's take the same scenario, but let's have white make a knight's move here instead of a one space jump. What happens? Well, white's forced to hit their head on black stones, black and Hane, and black continues to extend. With this knight's move, black has halted white's one space jump in its tracks and successfully bent around and controlled the outside of the board. The difference between this and if black did it one move later is huge. You can see how huge that is, right? From a perspective of white being out of enemy lines, from a perspective of black controlling more of the board, taking the earliest opportunity to attack with these types of knight's moves in a one space jump situation is incredibly important. Now, to wrap this whole lesson up, I want to talk about how to decide which moves to make. In a game of Go, you're not presented with single diagrams, you're not presented with single problems, and even though a lot of players can probably find the right move in an isolated situation, in a game where a lot is going on, it's probably a lot more difficult. In this situation, it's black's move, and black has 3 opportunities, 3 ways to get ahead, 3 ways to progress with the game. The first way is a straight-up invasion. Second way is extending, trying to bend ahead of white's one space jump stones. And the third is to creep in and try to get ahead by abusing white's shape between these two, here and here. Which one you pick depends. And there's no hard or consistent rule for this. It's really based on the score. Depending on if the black's relationship score to white's score and black's potential balances of territory is going to determine whether black makes an insane invasion and has to try to squeak out a life, otherwise black will lose, or if black is comfortable just sneaking in, plodding along, making light reductions, expanding the framework, and that is honestly just a counting problem. And so to wrap up this sort of chapter, Kageyama talks about how important counting is. And when you have multiple situations where you can get ahead of your opponent in multiple ways, having a good count of the board is essential in figuring out what to do. But beyond that, if you just follow these same principles, if you learn how to bend around your enemy's edge, if you learn how to respect getting ahead of your opponent, if you can play in a way that maximizes the value of your surround while keeping your cut safe, and if you can learn to punish overextensions and dubious surrounds by your opponent, your game is going to get so much stronger. And this is the culmination of everything that we've been learning for these past few chapters of Go. So I really hope that you enjoyed this chapter. I hope that you're enjoying the series. Give it love if you do. Like, subscribe, comment, all that stuff. I cannot wait to keep going. We are 4 chapters in. We've got about 6 more to go. So we are trucking through this book, and I'm so excited. I'm so excited to learn about the rest of what we have in store. So I hope that you've gotten some inspiration, and let me know how your games go. Are you feeling like the series is helping you improve? Are you winning more games? Are you finding that you're more comfortable on the board? I really hope so, because these games and these principles are so important for Go. And as a Dawn player, I'm just coming back to these principles now with fresh eyes and a fresh brain. And they are so, so helpful for me. So I can only imagine how helpful they'll be for all of you. Anyways, have a wonderful week. Have great games. Keep it up. I will talk to y'all later. I'm hoping to stream soon. Keep an eye out for that. And yeah, have a wonderful time. I'll talk to you this week, and good luck.